Hello, friends. I'm sorry. It's been a couple of weeks since I've talked with you, and I am going to talk about adaptability and the essential elements that are required for gardening. But before I do that, I want to tell you something that really is exciting that happened to me this week. My little brother Morris Wright called me from Florida, and they've had hurricanes down there, two in the last month or so, that have been really devastating. But he was thinking about his older, decrepit brother, and he called me and said, "Why haven't I seen any more videos uploaded?" And that made me so excited because it made me realize that there are people out there who are looking for these videos. And if you want to know if you're important or not, it is the group small enough that if you're not there, they miss you? Or is the group large enough that when you do show up, you can make a difference? And so when my little brother called me and asked me about uploading videos, I knew that he had been watching them and that he was checking on his big brother to make sure I was okay. The bottom line is I was okay, and I want to talk. I want to pick up our conversation. I kind of got carried away with talking about adaptability and talking about my encounter with a barber who didn't know that the sun comes up in the east and it goes down in the west. Well, the moral of that story is that we've got to pay attention to where we are, or a way that my English teacher told me not to say it is to say where you're at, or as my African American friends say, where you stay at. Where is a plant located and what is necessary for it to grow? And so I want to talk about that a little bit today. It's very important to remember that plants require the sunshine. Photosynthesis is the process by which plants take in energy from the sun and sustain their life. They create sugars or energy out of that sunlight. And so it's very important that a plant be exposed to enough radiation, but not too much radiation. And one of the ways I remember that is that what may be 8 hours of sunshine in Nova Scotia, where I used to farm, is not the same as 8 hours of radiation in Central Texas. A plant can absolutely get wilted and desiccated and die in this tremendous radiation in the sunshine here. I've noticed that, and in fact, I saw on the internet a couple of weeks ago a mention of Faulkner's great novel, A Light in August. And it's taken from the fact that in that book, there is a moment where he refers in Mississippi to that moment that we all know when the incredible oppressive heat of the summer gives way to a cooler breeze, and as the earth tilts away from the sun, there is a little bit of room to breathe and a little bit more accommodating temperature. A plant cannot have no radiation. A lot of plants will not grow in the shade, but a plant cannot take too much radiation. It'll deplete the plant of too much moisture and kill it. And so it is important to keep in mind that the seasons bring with them a different kind of radiation, and that is what is necessary in the garden. There are some plants that grow in the springtime. And as the days get longer and longer, and there are plants, especially fruiting plants like tomatoes and peppers, that grow best in the long days of summer. And there are some plants that grow well in the autumn. And in our case, in Central Texas and in Mississippi and in much of the South, things grow very well. The leafy greens grow well in the fall because the plant is wanting to reproduce, of course, and as the days are getting shorter and shorter and shorter, plants tend to put their energy into leafing instead of fruiting or seeding. And so we can grow a lot of wonderful greens in the fall, which include lettuce, kale, collards, all of the cabbage family, kale, collards, Brussels sprouts, and mustards, and all of the Asian greens are mustards. They are in the brassica family, but they are different than cabbage and kale and broccoli, which are more closely related to cabbage. But all of these plants do very well here in the fall and toward the winter. One of the biggest determinants of what we can garden with is temperature. Most plants, not all, but most plants can only survive in the absence of frost. Below 32 degrees, a plant cells rupture, and oftentimes that plant will die. And many of the garden plants require the temperature to remain above 32 degrees or they will die. And when I was farming for a living, I was very aware of those frost nights, those first frosts and last frosts, when I might have already had seeds coming up. And those, I had a friend in Nova Scotia who used to say the frost comes up from the ocean like a thief in the night. And he used that image that Jesus used in the Bible to speak of the stealthy and unexpected, and there is nothing you can do about it. When the frost comes up into your garden, many of the plants are going to die. But luckily, there are many plants that will survive a small frost as long as the temperature comes up a little bit, sometimes pretty quickly. And I would point you to the things that can handle a little bit of frost, and they are kale and collards and cabbage and many of those brassica families. They can be grown throughout the winter. Oftentimes, it is not in the south. It is not the temperature that limits a plant, but it is the amount of light that they're getting. Remember, as we go toward December 21st, days get shorter and shorter and shorter. And as we go through the winter solstice, they'll begin to get longer and longer and longer. Something I noticed when I was growing tomatoes from seed. I could plant tomato seeds in November and again in February, and the plants that came up in February would outgrow the ones that I planted in November, because the days upon their emergence, the days were getting longer and longer, and they thrived in that atmosphere. I only was able to grow tomato plants because I was able to keep them out of the cold. there are a couple of technologies that are available to allow plants, but it requires you to have a small enough place that you can do this. When I was growing up, I would see people on cold, frosty nights, they would throw sheets over a tree, a bush, or a plant that they wanted to save, and that provided a frost protection, a blanket that allowed a plant to survive one of those nights where it dipped below 32 degrees. There is a cover. There are different grades, the thicker ones and the thinner ones, but I use frost covers as so if I see it's going to get down really cool at night, I'll put some of that roll. It's called roll cover. It is a woven poly kind of material, like a sheet that you can put over your plants. I will warn you though, but oftentimes wherever that fabric touches the plants during a cold night, it'll often burn or kill the plant. When I was farming for a living, I would often have to rip cover that had frozen onto my kale plants, but I could rip it off and not use that part that burned, that stuck to the plant, and the rest of the plant would be fine for a harvest. So cold and heat are some of the things that you have to have plants adapted for. I would mention also that there is a requirement for water and for fertility. Let me say a little something about soil. Soils can be loose and friable, or they can be real tight and clay, but clay soils tend to hold on to nutrients and water better than sandy soils, but some plants cannot live in clay. They've got to have a looser soil. So I hope that you have some good luck in gardening as you deal with these things. Water, the amount of moisture that you have, light, and the amount of temperature change in your plants. But as you consider these things, they are a part. I just want to remind you, don't think you can't garden in the winter. Some of the most nutritious food you can produce grows in the winter. And if you want to look at a book, there's a wonderful book by Eliot Coleman called 4-Season Harvest. There are things that may not grow on December 21st, but they certainly can be harvested on December 21st. So don't be discouraged. There are things you can do in gardening, even though we're facing winter. In fact, you can do some really good gardening during this time. Thank you. I'll see you in the next video. And if not, my brother Morris will call me, and I count on that. And I think that was such a loving thing to do. And so I want you to count on these videos coming out every week. Thank you. Thank you. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.